right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Those who've been tuning in this month know that our theme has been conservation. We've bounced all around the world talking to scientists, explorers, and conservationists who've dedicated their lives to protecting ecosystems as well as the amazing biodiversity of life found within those ecosystems. So we have one more live event to cap off this month, and it's going to be a pretty good one. We're going to join Callie Broaddus. Callie has just returned from an expedition to the Ecuadorian Chocó rainforest, one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. And she's got some stories and images to share with us from that expedition. So she founded Reserva, the Youth Land Trust, to empower young people around the world to take solutions-based action towards solving our climate and biodiversity crises. She and her team are currently working to create the world's first entirely youth-funded nature reserve. And Reserva recently gave students an opportunity to name a new species of frog found in that very forest. So pretty darn cool. I'm going to bring Callie in live with us here. Hey, Callie, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. Well, it's great to see you. I know you just got back from a pretty wild expedition, and I have a feeling we're going to get to find out just how wild that was.
Yeah, I'm going to do my best. As I was saying to you earlier, I took about 12,000 images, a little more than 12,000 images combined with my two teammates who came from Reserva, 12,500 or so. And so I did my best to comb through those in the short time I had. And I'm looking forward to showing you some of what we found.
All right. Well, we're glad to get you. I'll let you take over for a little bit, and then we'll fire away with some questions from our live classrooms.
That sounds good. All right. And am I screen sharing right now?
Yep.
So you're seeing this like inception?
We are diving deep into it.
All right.
There we go.
So I am going to take you into this little program called Lightroom here, which is where I organize all my photos. Usually I would have a little slideshow prepared for you, but I just got back. So we're just going to do it in my program. So first I want to say that the purpose of this expedition, and actually I might stop sharing just to explain this. So the purpose of this expedition is very important. It's to monitor and to understand something about the endangered species that are living on this site. We're going to the Chocó cloud forest in Ecuador, which is one of the most biodiverse and endangered ecosystems in the world. And we know that on this site, we have two species of toad that were previously thought extinct, actually, for about 30 years until scientists found them in this area of the forest. And over the years, they've been trying to monitor those populations and find out, are they healthy? Are they still in existence? Are they suffering from chytrid fungus, which is a fungus that's going around lots of frogs and lots of toads right now? And so they're monitoring every 4 months or so how these animals are doing. And even though we're in the middle of a pandemic and it's become much, much harder to travel and to do this work, it's still incredibly important that it gets done. So they decided to schedule this expedition right now. Everyone had to test negative for coronavirus. Everyone had to quarantine in advance, wear super masked up all the way to the site. But as soon as we got there, it was go time. And it was a 2.5-week long expedition with initially the goal of finding and studying these two species. They're called Colomy and Adelopis Koine. So those were our two target species. We had a lot of other goals as well. We wanted to start a bird monitoring program to teach the park guards how to begin handling birds and to study the birds that are coming through our site to get some data on those species. We also wanted to look around and see what else might be there that might be a new species or that might be something that wasn't previously recorded on the site. So we had a team of orchid experts there who were looking for orchids. And then we had this large team of herpetologists, which are the people who study reptiles and amphibians. And they were looking to see what species aside from those two target species might be there. This was a fairly new site. We had never done an expedition to this far into the deep jungle in this area before. So we were expecting some new finds, but really the target was these two toads. So I will share my screen and show you a little bit of what this area looks like. All right. So when you drive in to from Quito, which is the capital of Ecuador, it takes about 6 hours or 7 hours to drive all the way north to the Colombian border. And as you leave Quito, you leave the city and you start seeing more and more green space, and you think it's really, really beautiful. But passing through these areas, which is now my second or third time doing this, you notice that actually all of these mountains used to be treed. They used to be cloud forest, and instead now they're completely deforested. And what we noticed this time, we actually took a photo of this mountain the previous expedition, and this time we noticed that there was actually, I don't know if you can see this, there's a little sad face on the mountain, and we all agreed that the mountain was sort of sad to be stripped from its previous condition. But as you get closer to the site where we were studying, I'm going to have to go out of order here, you start to see what it's supposed to look like. So this is a cloud forest, and you can see why. I'm sure you've heard over the last month about how rainforests are part of our water system. They live and they breathe and they cycle our water, and you can see that process happening in real time right here. So this is early in the morning. I put my drone up into the air, and this is what that cloud forest is supposed to look like. You can see the water just evaporating off the trees and turning into clouds. And over the course of the day, those clouds will go up and up and up until they're above us. But for now, they're below us. This is the actual site. So this is where we hiked, all the way starting at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen here, up, extremely steep, up to the top of this ridge. And then we walk along this cliff here, which is pretty scary. We walk along the cliff with the white rocks, and then down the other side of the mountain, down deep behind these clouds. And so what we're looking for is these really wet environments where frogs might live. We set up camp, and this is what it looks like after a couple days. It starts to get pretty muddy. And everyone only has 1 or 2 sets of clothes, well, 2 or 3 sets of clothes. So you're pretty much always washing and drying something. It doesn't dry very well because it is a cloud forest where humidity is like 100%. So things are pretty much always wet. And you can see on the ground just how muddy it is. And even Mario here, he's sitting in his tent with his feet hanging out the edge. It's because there's really no point in taking off your rain boots pretty much ever. That's what camp looks like. Our breakfast, lunch, dinner table was often commandeered by the herpetology team, who, as you can see right here, his name is Danielle, and I'm going to zoom in here. He has a long white stick in his hand. That is a swab. So what he's doing is he's taking, like a Q-tip, he's taking a swab on the back of a frog that he's found, and he's going to take that swab and test it for that fungus that I mentioned, chytrid fungus, and find out what is the health of these animals living in this particular area. So that's what camp looks like. And to be honest, we would not be able to get there without the help of people like Milton here. So Milton is one of our park guards. He's from the Awa indigenous community, and he is about 1 month into his job as a park guard with our partner Echo Minga at this site. He carried so much stuff. He carried pretty much everything you see in this camp. He and the other 4 park guards, they just are so incredibly strong, and they made that hike that I mentioned up this site 3 times a day to carry everything. So before I go any further, I just want to say, without the help of park guards like Milton, who are, as you can see here, they carry things in baskets on their backs with straps over their foreheads. So all of the weight is going down through the top of their head and into their spine. Without their help, we would not be able to do any of the science, any of the research that we're doing. So on that hike in, and I'll just introduce my little team here. This is me on the left, of course. This is my partner, Javier Roballo, who is the manager of Dracula Reserve. and he's the manager of Fundación Ecominga in this area where we're working. That's our partner organization. Then these are 2 youth team members from Reserva, Natalia Espinosa on the left, she's Ecuadorian, and sorry, and Pearson McGovern on the right, who's from Poland and the US, and he's a herpetologist. So this was our team as we hiked in. Along the hike, we saw quite a few things that we didn't expect to see. So I said that we were looking out for frogs and toads, but we were also keeping our eyes open for other things. And this is one of those other things. So this is a type of orchid called Masdevallia picturata, but it surprised us to find it at this elevation because it was lower than we thought it might be. And so we brought it back to our orchid expert, or photos of it back to our orchid expert later, and he said, well, maybe this is a new species. We left it there though, so we'll have to come back and find it. This was another find that we thought was really, really interesting. And this was just on our walk-in before we even began the process of studying for frogs and doing our night surveys. We just found these 4 butterflies lined up on a branch for no apparent reason. They didn't seem to be drinking anything. They didn't seem to be doing any kind of mating ritual. They were just sitting there. And as we approached, they flew away. And we thought, oh, shoot, too bad. That'll never happen again. Well, within a minute, they had flown right back into the exact same spot. We thought that's really interesting. And a week later, when we walked back as we were leaving camp, the 3 of these 4 butterflies were on the exact same branch in the exact same place. So we don't actually have an answer as to why that might be. But we're going to take that information to an entomologist and find out. So a lot of times on these expeditions, you have your target, which for us was these 2 frogs, but then you find so many other things that are so mysterious and that you have so many questions. And that's really what makes me want to come back again and again and again. One last thing about camp that I'll show you before I leave this little screen is what the bathroom looks like. Now, this might not be something you would normally show on a slideshow, but I think it's pretty wild. It's pretty scary to use this. It's just a toilet seat balanced on 2 logs hanging over a gaping pit. So that is really the epitome of what it feels like to be in camp. So I'm going to show you a few more of the things that we found because it is just so fun to find the incredible diversity of life that's in this area. So I'll start with orchids. We found quite a few orchids. A lot of times you'll find multiple things. So this is an orchid with an inchworm going across the orchid. We also have a picture down here of an orchid with a weevil. Let's see if I can find it. A weevil that I thought, oh gosh, cool, this weevil is pollinating the orchid. But it turns out that weevils are actually, they're actually predators of orchid pollen. So they'll go in and they're actually like eating it, trying to, it's actually not that great for the plant. But there he is inside. And I only found that guy after a couple minutes of photographing the orchid. So there's so much as you keep looking in and in and in. This orchid is actually a new register for Ecuador. It's called Lepanthus acrohenia, and it's only known from 2 places in Colombia. So it was a really exciting find to see this one in Ecuador. And it's really small. It's only, this whole flower is only about, I don't know, half a centimeter or so. Super, super small. We found a blue mushroom. This is really exciting. It's a species that has only been registered maybe a dozen times in all of South America on iNaturalist, which is a great platform for registering species. And then again, there are lots of things that we didn't have anyone on our team who was an entomologist. So I couldn't ask anyone, what is this really cool bright red dragonfly? These are questions for next time, questions to ask when we come back to the city and find out more from other experts who weren't on our expedition. So we began our herping, which is the term you use to describe going out and looking for lizards and reptiles, anything reptiles or amphibians, that's herping. So usually we go out at night, and as Joe mentioned, a couple months ago, we had a competition to describe to name a newly described species of frog. Well, it was a huge surprise to me that the very first frog we found was Helocyrtus conscientia, which is the frog that we all named. And in fact, I have to give a little shout out to Miss Dominski's class from grade 6 from Niagara Falls, Ontario. Y'all actually were finalists, and I still need to send you your email, but you were finalists with your name submission, and this is that frog. So it turns out that on this deep, deep site, our Helocyrtus conscientia is actually the most populous frog in the entire area, which is incredible when you think it's a brand new species to science. No one had known about it. So we saw quite a few of them, and then we were extremely lucky to see 7 species of snakes. This one's pretty interesting. It's called Erythrolampris viti, and what's so fascinating about this one is that there's not that much known about it because its known home range is only about 10 square kilometers. So it's a really beautiful black and red checkered pattern, but it's non-venomous. A lot of times when we see species that are colorful, we think, oh, danger, stay back. But that's not necessarily the case. So our herpetologists looked at it and they said this is safe, and that's when we knew, okay, that means it's safe to handle. So my particular job is to take photos of everything, and very lucky to work with herpetologists who can let us know when something is venomous or non-venomous. So for example, I would never pick up a big snake on my own, but because we're with herpetologists who said, this is Turonius monticola, it's the most common snake in the Andes, it is okay to pick up, then we're able to pick it up, take photos, and then the scientists can study it, find out if it's a male or a female, if there are any parasites on it, and get all kinds of really important information about the snake to take home to their labs. So let's see, those are 2 of the species of snakes we found, and then I have 2 more that are my favorites. This one is called Dipsas elegans. It's a snail eater. And it does this really cool behavior where it just goes straight up. And I actually have a little video that I wanted to show you of it doing that. So this is Natalia. And here she is demonstrating how to properly handle a snake. So you just put your hands forward and act like you're the next branch. And you can see this snake is really curious. It's a total adventure. It's always on the move, which made it really hard to photograph. And then every once in a while, it'll just go straight up. We call it periscoping. I don't know what it's really called, but it's when it's looking up for the next branch. So these are arboreal snakes. They're constantly climbing through the trees, slithering through the trees. And so sometimes they'll just kind of stiffen up and look up for the next branch. You can see they're super curious. They're not at all afraid of people. Really, really fun to handle them. And then if anyone out there watching this live stream thinks that snakes aren't cute, I have a challenge for you, because this snake is the cutest thing I think I've ever seen. It's called Imintodes senchoa, and this is probably the cutest snake picture I think I've ever taken. And so if anyone ever tells you snakes aren't cute, please take a screenshot of this snake, send it to them and say, you are a dummy. Look at how adorable that snake is. So this one is so cute and so sweet that we were even able to take it back to show some people, some local people, and start teaching some kids about how snakes are actually not that scary. There's a huge problem in this area with people thinking every snake is venomous. And so there are a lot of snake deaths of people that just kill every snake they can find because they're afraid of them. And rightfully so. There are a lot of venomous snakes in this area, but this is not one of them. As you can see, it's completely harmless. So we were really excited about the number of snakes we found. I could show you snakes pictures for hours, but we had a job to do. So we were looking for frogs, and we came across quite a few herps. We came across this one. This is a Nullis Dracula. This is a brand new species described a couple years ago, and it's kind of one of the flagship species of our Dracula Youth Reserve. we came across this little guy. It's so cute. It's called a Nullis Dracula, and it just has a cute little nose. Sometimes we find them climbing through ferns. Sometimes we find them perched on leaves. And sometimes we find frogs that are incredibly small. This is a Prista Mantis, which is the most common genus of frog, incredibly small. And sometimes we find them quite big. So this is a female Pirimantis Laticlavius, and they have these amazing patterns, all and like incredible eyes. But again, we were looking really hard for these two species, and we weren't finding them. We weren't finding them. The previous expedition hadn't found any Adelopis, but they had found some Colomy. So we were really keeping our fingers crossed. Well, finally, on the maybe second or third day, after just so much time searching for these species, we got them. This is Adelopis Koine. It is a critically endangered toad, and it is one of the most endangered toads, most endangered amphibians in all of Ecuador. So we found, I believe, 4 individuals of this species. You can see that it has these really beautiful patterns. So what we do is we take photographic evidence of these frogs, of these toads, and we try to keep note of all of their spots and track these individuals. So if they're ever caught again, then we'll say, okay, well, this is the one that has a spot here, here, and here. And that means that, you know, we can learn something about its home range. How far does it move from one year to the next? We might even be able to start learning more about their lifespans. Really important information about these frogs. Gorgeous frogs, or toads, excuse me. The other species we were looking at is called Colomy, and I want to show you just how cool these frogs are. Sometimes they're called rocket frogs because they just look like they are poised to take off. They look like they'd be super fast, but actually they just crawl. And that made it a lot less scary to photograph them, because my job was just to take photos of everything the scientists brought in. And sometimes, especially with those little frogs, they'd just jump. And then I would have no idea where they went. So I always wanted to have Natalia or Pearson with me to say, oh my gosh, don't move. I found it. It's on the ground, or it's on top of your camera, or it's in your lens hood. But these guys, they didn't really go anywhere. So they just sort of crawl. So what I had to do was take photos of every single specimen on white, to make it really easy to see the distinguishing features of the frog. So I had to take them from the side like that, from in front, and they always look really angry in this species, from the back, and then my personal favorite, from their belly. So this is called the ventral side, and it just looks like a little gremlin. And I think I want to cut this out and make it a bookmark or something, because it's just so cute. So we would photograph all these species, and it was such an exciting thing to find not only our 2 target species, but 4 of these, and I think we found 6 or 7 of these, including juveniles. So this is a juvenile Colomy, and you can see their bright red eyes, and you can see that they have some really interesting patterns all over them. So it was an extremely successful trip in terms of finding our target species. And then beyond that, we were able to do quite a bit more. We were able to find, there we go, we were able to start a program for monitoring bird populations as well. So I know I don't have a ton of time, but I wanted to show you a few things. We started up a program to monitor bird populations because it's a really great way to get youth involved. It's a great way to get the park guards involved in research in a way that you don't have to go to school and do a 4-year degree to help with the research. So here's Javier, my partner, and he's taking a bird that he's caught in a mist net, which is a really fine net that they place in a certain spot along a hill, and birds will fly into it and get caught, and it doesn't hurt them, but it is fairly invasive, so we only like to do it for science. So he's fanning out the wing in a way that doesn't hurt the bird to look at the feathers and determine how old is this bird? Is it molting? What are the quality of the feathers? Are there parasites on this bird? It's a lot more information than you can get just from seeing a bird in a tree. And then before we let it go, we always take one quick photo to make sure that we have registered the species and that we'll remember that we had it. This is there's a difference between the way that you hold larger birds and hummingbirds. So larger birds like this, for a photo, you're going to hold them by the strongest part of their body. So you're holding them by their legs, where they're super strong. But on a hummingbird, you hold them by their wings because it's the strongest muscle in their body. So, and we're giving them a little spot to rest there before we let it fly off. We found some pretty incredible birds. This is the Clubwing Mannequin, and it has a bone in its wing where it claps its wings and it makes this sharp smack sound. And it's part of the way that it communicates. So I know I don't have time to show you all of my favorite birds and all of my favorite animals that we photographed, but here are a few. Flamefaced Tanager is just a brightly colored bird. And then I'm going to show you one more. The green Honeycreeper. So it's always exciting when you find these brightly colored birds flying into your net. The white bearded mannequin, you can see how it got its name. We got very lucky to get about 30 species of birds. We got about 35 species of herps in the end, including some like this one, this is called Bowana Rubracilla. This was only the second ever sighting of the species in all of Ecuador. So even though we got our target species and we were really excited about that, we are even more excited to have so much new information about new species to Ecuador, new species to the province, new species to the reserve, and then even some potential new species to science. So like potentially this one. So I think, I know I don't have time to go through everything, but if you see anything that you want to ask a question about, I'll leave my screen share up for a little bit. And I think I'll throw it back to you for questions because I usually run out of time for that.
All right, Callie. Well, I can see why. I mean, 12,000 plus pictures to go through, all of that incredible variety of life you found. That's it just seems like quite an expedition, and everywhere you turn, there was something amazing to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, wow. I can see that there are questions in the chat.
Yeah, we'll bring in, that's Mrs. Holden's class has been sending some of those in, but we'll bring her in live to ask a few of those questions. But what I do want to just touch on, Callie, before we do start those questions, I'm putting up the website for Reserva. How can students get involved to help protect this region of Ecuador and the rainforest?
I love that question. There are several ways you can get involved. So Reserva is an organization that I started specifically to connect youth and kids to really important land conservation that is necessary for science and for the health of biodiversity globally. So we have several ways you can get involved. Number one, you can do a fundraiser and actually help us buy land. It's way cheaper than you would think to buy significant amounts of land and put it into private conservation through organizations in Ecuador or in other places around the world. We're currently working in Ecuador. And so it costs about, for every dollar you raise, it's about 120 square feet, which means that $3 is about the size of an average classroom. So if you think about it, and I think I showed some pictures of trees and things, every tree is like a hotel for animals. It is incredible how much life you can fit on a $3 patch of land. So one thing you can definitely do is you can donate. If you have anyone who gives you a little bit of money around the holidays, you can donate your own savings, your own money. You can do a fundraiser, cookies, Christmas cards, whatever. You can do fundraisers. You can also be part of our 1 million letters campaign. So we have a campaign where we ask you to write a letter saying what you love about nature, why world governments need to commit to protecting at least 30% of our planet by 2030. And we will find a donor who can match your letter with $3. So if you don't have access to money right now, or you've already fundraised or you can't, no worries. We've got you covered. Just write your letter, send it to us, and we will protect that classroom-sized area of rainforest for you. So those are two important ways you can get involved. You can also follow us on Instagram, follow us on social media. There are always ways to get involved like that. Please share it with your family and friends. Parents are welcome to support the organization. And yeah, definitely welcome all forms of support.
All right, excellent. Well, let's start grabbing some questions here. Let's start with Mrs. Holden's group. They're joining us in Spruce Grove, Alberta. Let me bring her in here, her virtual class. How we doing, Miss Holden?
Hi there. We're really enjoying the kids and love seeing all these pictures.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Do you want to pick a couple of the questions for us?
We have a whole lot of questions. So there's several wondering about the different types of frogs. How many different species would you say that there are in the cloud forest?
Oh my gosh. I'm not a scientist, so I wouldn't even pretend to have that level of knowledge. I can tell you that we found 35 species of herps, which includes the 7 species of snakes and I think 4 species of lizards, 2 species of Bolitoglossa, which is a lungless salamander, which is actually the fastest tongue in the animal kingdom. So that gives you an idea. We probably had 20 odd species of frogs and toads just on a 2-week expedition. That's going to be a fraction of what's actually there. So I would guess it's got to be in the 150 range or so. No one really knows because in this particular area, it's really underexplored. There are definitely new species that have not yet been discovered. We have 2 or 3 that we are doing some further research. We're not positive that they're new species, but they very well may be from this expedition alone.
All right. How about another one, Miss Holden?
We have lots. About the fungus that you were talking about, why is it so dangerous and what its effects are, and also is it dangerous to the humans? You were swabbing them, you have to be careful.
Joe, maybe you might actually know as much about this as I do. My understanding is that it's not dangerous to humans, but it can be dangerous for humans to pass it on to other frogs. So every single time we touched any frog, every time, we always brought out hand sanitizer, cleaned our hands, because what we don't want to do is if one frog has it, we don't want to transfer it to another frog. But as far as I know, no, it does not affect humans. I believe the fungus affects the cells in a stage of development. So I want to say that it affects frogs as they're going from the tadpole stage into the frog stage. That's my understanding, but I would definitely Google that. Joe, do you know that?
Yeah, well, it affects their skin, particularly that has keratin in it. So it can spread across their bodies, and frogs, it's really important that their skin stays permeable. It's a way that they absorb some oxygen and can get rid of waste that way too. So you're absolutely right. And it's easily transported by us, even in our boots and our shoes, is why it's so important. I'm sure you took lots of precautions.
Definitely. Yeah. So before you go into the rainforest, or into the cloud forest in our case, everyone lined up their boots and we cleaned them all before we even stepped foot. Because if you have just been exploring in Virginia, where I was, and then you just think your boots are clean and you take them there, you could march in and be bringing a fungus into a completely pristine environment without even knowing it. So even at home, if you're just exploring in Ontario or wherever you are, if you go from one environment to another, please do wash your boots, because this fungus is everywhere and it's becoming quite a big problem.
All right. I'm going to bring in Mr. Butch's group from Toronto. How are we doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good.
My class was wondering if you've seen any poison dart frogs in the cloud forest.
We actually saw one. It was the very, very first frog we found. Let me see if I can find it. It was actually when I was setting up my camera gear, and Pearson and Natalia just went off on a little, just a little jaunt around the little, like where we were staying the night before our expedition. So it wasn't even in the deepest part. Hold on, I'll share my screen so you can see it. Share. Okay, can you see this guy? So this is actually a poison dart frog, and it looks pretty plain from on top, but if you look underneath, it has this pretty cool spotted underbelly, super small, and that's sort of how you identify them. You identify them because they're very small and they have this very like kind of rocket-like appearance. They're pretty upright. But yes, that's actually the only one that we found. They're not actually that dangerous to handle. You just want to make sure that if you have any open cuts or anything that you don't touch it with those, because the problem with poison dart frogs is if you get the poison into your bloodstream. So that might not be universal. There might be some frogs that you don't want to touch at all. But these ones were fine to touch, and yeah, so that was our very first frog of the expedition.
Very cool. Go ahead with another one, Mr. Boccia, if you have one.
We were wondering if you found any venomous snakes along the way as well.
So yes, I'm actually not allowed to share photos of the one that we found because there were questions about its identity. But I will say that, yes, we did find one species of venomous snake. We were in an area where there are lots. They have eyelash vipers, which are gorgeous and have like really cool spikes on their eyes. We had to be extremely careful where we walked, where you put your hands, because they could be anywhere. They could be up at your eye level in a branch. They could be on the ground right where your next step is. This whole ecosystem is so lush. It's so much moss, and everything is so well camouflaged with everything else that we were extremely cautious about where we walked. We wound up having two venomous snakes that I think I can show you. I can show you a picture of one. Two venomous snakes that someone in the neighborhood had killed. Unfortunately, so I'm just gonna see if I can find this picture. Someone had killed a snake. It was a 6-foot-long venomous snake, and they said that it had tried to attack their child while they were in the field, and so they killed it. And so it was really sad for the snake, but we were able to do some research and brought up some really good questions. And then we were able to find a live one of that species at the end. And so that's the one where unfortunately I can't show photos, but you will have to follow Reserva and watch this space. Let's see if I can find it. It might take me a minute to find these photos because these are.
That's okay. That's a good hook to keep people
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'll see what I can find. I will say that there was a car ride where I had a bucket at my feet that said dangerous, toxic material, do not touch. That was the sign we put on this bucket to make it so that no one was curious about what was in the bucket. You don't want anyone to see live snake and think, ooh, and pop the bucket and then find out that it's a snake that could kill you in 2 hours if it bit you. So we said toxic material, but did have a live snake in the bucket at my feet for a while there. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to bring Mrs. Heaton in. She's got some grade 6-7s in Chatham. Let me see if we can. There we go. Hey, Miss Heaton.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey.
They're loving this presentation, by the way. We're across southwestern Ontario.
Wow.
So anyway, their questions were about the birds and like how many different types of new birds did you discover and how many in general you encountered?
Yeah. So we saw 30 species of birds in our nets specifically. So we saw many more outside of the nets. We saw toucans up in the trees. They're pretty big. We saw arasaris. We saw eagles, hawks, all kinds of big birds up in the sky. But what we were actually studying were the birds that were kind of under the forest canopy that could be up to, flying around up to maybe 15 feet in the air or 4 meters or so in the air. And so we set up these big nets that you can barely see. Actually, I walked straight into one the very first time we set them up and had to just disentangle myself. And so we saw 30 species of birds just in a couple of days of doing those nets. And most of them were hummingbirds or tanagers, birds this size. A few of them were new species to the reserve, not new species to science, but to the reserve. One of them was what Javier, my partner, would call a lifer for him. So it means that he has been coming to this area his entire life. He knows birds inside and out, and this is a species he's never gotten to see. And so we caught one of those, and that was a lifer for him. It's really satisfying for someone who studies birds and is really knows their birds, especially from a certain area. It's much, much, much less common to find a new species of bird to science. So that's because birds have such a wide range. Most of the time they're flying long distances. A lot of times they're migratory. So even if you have, at home here where I am, we have rose-breasted grosbeaks, gorgeous bird with a big red front, black and white. Those birds actually migrate all the way into the Chocó. So you can find those birds there, even though it's much harder to access them there. But in the Chocó, you'll also find a lot of species that we call endemic, which means that they live there and only there, nowhere else. And so if there was a new species to discover in this area, it would be probably one of those endemic species, one of those species that lives there, that doesn't migrate, doesn't really go anywhere else, and it's just managed to stay hidden for a long, long time. That actually happened 2 years ago with another local organization called the Hocotoco Foundation. They found a new species of hummingbird called the blue-throated hill star. So that's got to be the thrill of a lifetime to discover a new species of bird. What's more likely for us to find something new is an orchid. We found at least 4 new species of orchids on this expedition, probably more, or even an amphibian. In this area, it's definitely possible to discover a new species of amphibian.
All right, Timothina, if you have another one handy, go ahead.
They were wondering about the smallest frog. How small was the smallest frog?
So cute. The smallest frog, it's probably the size of your pinky. A lot of times those are the juveniles. So they're, they just are still growing up. And so they start out that small. But definitely some of the adults are super tiny, just the size of your thumbnail. Those are the ones, like I said, those are the ones that I have the hardest time photographing, because as soon as I put the camera up to my eyes, I only get to see this much. So if it jumps, it just seems like it has gone a mile away. And there was one day at camp where we had a tiny, tiny frog that we thought is probably a new species or it's questionable, maybe a new species. And so I was really nervous about it. And I was just by myself. It was broad daylight. So I thought, okay, it's fine. I can photograph this thing by myself. And I lined up and it hopped, and it looked to me like it had shot to the moon. And so I just sounded the alarm. I was like, guys, I need help. I need help. Someone needs to come. Help, 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 help. It jumped really, really far. I had everyone looking like all the way around 3 meters, 4 meters away on the ground. And I found it maybe 6 inches from where it had started after everyone had panicked and looked everywhere. So yeah, the smallest ones were so cute to see, but gosh, what a pain to photograph.
All right, I'm going to squeeze in 2 questions from YouTube here. Mrs. Wu's class would like to know, where could they go to maybe research a little bit more about the Chocó?
Yeah.
And Mrs. Wong's class is really curious about, what do you think was the rarest animal bird or insect that you might have encountered during the last expedition?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, first of all, you can go to reservadracula.org. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I can find the website and put it up. I'm pretty sure it's reservadracula.org. That has tons of information about this particular area of the Chocó. So the Chocó is an ecosystem that goes through the Andes mountain range. Most of you have heard of the Amazon. This is to the west of the Amazon in the mountains. And so it's higher elevation, which means that it has an entirely different group of animals and plants, and it's just entirely different ecosystem. So you have to find very specific information about that type of ecosystem. If you just search rainforest, it's not going to be anything like the Chocó. So the best information you'll find there is going to be from the Ecuadorian foundations that work there. I believe Reserva, RESERVA, Dracula.org. Yeah, Joe's got it up. And I hope you've tested that because I think that's correct. Definitely go there, find out more about the reserve and the animals that live there. And then the other question was, sorry, can you repeat the other question? Oh, hello?
Yeah, they were curious about what you thought the rarest thing you found was on this expedition.
Oh, that's right.
Insect, a bird, a plant, what was it?
Yeah, I would say that the rarest thing we found was probably the toad that was our target species. And we were shocked that we found 4 of them, but this is such a pristine, untouched area of cloud forest that it's a real relief that we found 4 of them. That's the Adelopis Koine, that speckledy one. But also the frog that I showed that was only the 2nd time it's ever seen in Ecuador, that's a pretty cool find. We had another frog that was the 2nd time it had ever been seen in the entire province. That was a really cool find. And then I will show you one thing that is one of my favorite finds because none of us have any idea what it is. Let me just pull it up on my screen. I called it a jelly slug. I have no idea what it is. Hold on, share screen. Share, okay, can you see? Okay, this is what I'm calling a jelly slug. If anyone out there has any idea what this is, please let me know. It is, we at first thought it was one of these transparent caterpillars. It's not. And it has a little set of eyes. You can see all of its organs inside. You can see its lungs and everything. And it was just sitting on the back of an orchid. That was my favorite weird little thing that we found. And it was right next to, this is one of my other favorite things, is this is a known species of Lepanthus orchid, but some of my favorite things to find are these orchids that they just look like they're on a spoon. They're super tiny, less than half a centimeter. And they just look really elegant and gorgeous. So yeah, I would say, but I'd say the jelly slug. That was one of the strangest things that we found.
Yeah, that is so cool.
I have no idea what that is.
Frogs were, you can see inside their stomachs, and
yeah. We were taking guesses as like, what's even the kingdom in the classification? Like, we don't know.
Yeah, pretty wild. Well, I think, that really hits home a point that we had from another speaker this morning who said, part of the best part about being in the rainforest is just getting down low and finding the small things. And I think you really illustrated that with the frogs, the toads, that jelly slug, and those orchids. Pretty incredible.
Yeah, there was one day where everyone else was out doing surveys and I just had to start photographing. I just had to get through all the things that they had brought back to camp over the previous day. And so it was just me and my partner Javier at camp. And I walked down to the bathroom. I showed you the bathroom. So I walked down to that and there was a tree that had been cut. They clearly cut it just to make way for the bathroom. And I noticed about an inch below the cut, there was a gorgeous orchid, like really cool little kind of looks like a cup. And I called Javier over and I said, hey, this is interesting. And then I pointed to 8 other species that I found on the tree. Just like, oh gosh, there are orchids all over this tree. And we spent about an hour looking at just this tree, looking at these species. The one that I pointed to is probably a new species. If it's not, then it's a species that's only known from one other location in a completely different area of Ecuador, and it looks totally different. And then there's another that is likely a new species, and then a few others that are just really beautiful orchids. So it's exactly true. I mean, you could find it on the most mundane of spots, like on your walk to the bathroom. You could just find a tree that you could spend hours at.
Amazing. Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to all the classes who joined us on YouTube today. Thank you for your great questions. Obviously, a huge shout out to our camera classrooms. And Callie, thank you. I know you just got back, so I know everything's fresh and there's a lot to go through, but thank you so much for taking us into what you found so far. And, you know, we can't wait a little way down the line to have you on again after you've had a chance to get through some of the crazy amount of photos and information you've gathered. So I'm going to flash the website one more time here.
Thank you.
Classrooms to check out and think about ways, whether it's the Million Letter campaign or doing little fundraisers, because it's amazing how much land, you know, for small amounts of money can be acquired.
Yeah, and I will say that we are in the home stretch. We need to raise about another $45,000 to complete the world's first entirely youth-funded nature reserve. So, I mean, if everyone watching this donated $1, we'd really help, you know, get along the way. So please do check it out. Rainforest Trust is matching every donation we receive from youth. And I'm so sorry if I didn't get to your questions in the chat. I'm seeing some really good questions. A lot of these are questions that we don't actually have answers to. So if I could say anything, please go become scientists. We need you to help find out the answers to these questions. How smart are frogs? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, how old can toads live in the forest? We don't know. We need to find that out.
Well, that is a good way to leave things, is that we do need more scientists. We need more explorers. We need more conservationists. And I think it's up to this generation to fill in some of the gaps that we have. Very cool. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Head over to exploringbytheseat.com. The December lineup is out now, and sign up for an event. We'll see everybody soon.
Thanks, Joe.